It is billed as the defining relationship for the next century, the great power partnership between India and America. At a recently held forum in Delhi, we discussed the contours and impact of this partnership. We held a special panel discussion to explore the evolving Indo-US collaboration in the tech sector, focusing on consumer devices. It was hosted by the US's Information Technology Industry Council, the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, and Koan Advisory Group. I was joined by Praveen Khandelwal, Member of Parliament, S. Gopalakrishnan, Director General, National Productivity Council of India, Jason Oxman, President and CEO, Information Technology Industry Council, DEEPAK JACOB, President and Group General Counsel, Dream Sports, and Vivan Sharan, Partner and Co-founder, Koan Advisory Group. Watch key excerpts from this panel on the special episode of Media Dialogues with Storyboard 18. Following the pivotal 2023 discussions between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, this forum aims to highlight how both these great nations can leverage their strengths, India in software and emerging technologies, and the US in high-tech manufacturing and R&D to drive innovation in consumer tech. Some of the key themes we will explore during the course of our discussion this evening include how Indo-US cooperation can shape the future of consumer devices, set global standards, and enhance security in the digital age, especially against the backdrop of tech leaps like the one we are witnessing right now in artificial intelligence. We are essentially seeing the convergence of purpose and innovation to solve the world's problems. This partnership, no doubt, will define the pace of innovation for the world and critically be inclusive in that innovation, driving impact on billions of lives globally. Let's start with consumer tech for the people and for the public interest. Given sort of the backdrop that I have set, Mr. Khandelwal, can you tell me, in your view, how can consumer technology be better utilized to serve the public interest? Let's start with that.
We need to have a comprehensive best practices, that is point number one, because we are talking from the point of view of consumer. Mm-hmm. As also, we need to educate and energize the consumer about the different choices. So in that case, technology is ultimately going to play a very important role. As of now, the government has done quite a lot about introduction of latest technology. So my limited point is, we have to go with a side-by-side approach. We need to educate and empower the people who are delivering. We need to educate and empower the people who are receiving.
Quickly, if you can tell me, where does the onus lie when it comes to empowering consumers and the education aspect?
See, the onus lies on the society as a whole. If we see government will educate and empower, then government has many things to do. We need to be extended arm of the government. It is the responsibility of forum like this. It is the responsibility of the trade organizations. It is the responsibility of the social organizations. Social organization means not holding functions and all that. It is our duty, being a social animal, to empower and educate our countrymen about the development. And companies can play a bigger role because, let me put very straight, all companies under the law has a big CSR fund. Mm-hmm. So let them use their CSR fund for education and empowerment with the help of the various organizations. There are consumer organizations, there are transporter organizations. In every vertical of the trade and industry, we have organizations. So let the people who are having resources, let the people who can become a conduit, we must join hands together to change the entire gamut of system.
Mr. Gopalakrishnan, let me ask you this. As consumer tech, of course, becomes all pervasive, smartphones, IoT devices become more accessible, be it in the US or India. How do you see this contributing to improved productivity at a national level?
I just want to stress that to say, okay, I'm not just referring to the smartphone in somebody's hand. It's like the ball is much wider. I mean, just to throw some ideas, it could be your CCTVs, it could be your electronic devices, cars, etc. That apart, productivity, again, everything is productivity. But what I would like to flag is how consumer tech, and we need to move along there. I took a spin on the supply chain. I'm not going to talk about how the chain in terms of hardware or software for the devices. In terms of services which can be delivered through consumer tech. So my ideal situation will be, as a citizen, whether I'm a small shopkeeper or an MSME or an average citizen, whatever I have to deal with anything which is a government at any level, be it my city, my department, or even with the income tax or GST, is it possible for me to get everything done within a very short defined period of time from where I am with my devices? Now this, I think, is my holy grail. I don't want anybody to move anywhere, to go to any office, and I hope I made myself clear. It's absolutely seamless. Now that is possible today because of consumer tech. We can see the impact much more in the fintech sector, be it transactions, credit, investment, etc. But the point is, there the numbers are impressive. They are like world-beating numbers, but they are still the tip of the iceberg in terms of people much below there who can avail of those services. We need a situation where there's no crowd anywhere. Everybody has access to devices who can avail of those services. And that is where the government and the delivery mechanism comes in. So I think that is where the state is working, is moving, and miles to go before we reach there.
Jason, I'll come to you. Given that you represent some of the biggest tech companies in the world and you're a leading advocate of technology as well, let me just ask you a little bit about the organization here. In what ways do your member companies engage with governments to build more resilient, transparent, and secure tech supply chains?
The consumer electronics industry is obviously very focused on empowering customers. And the story of consumer electronics is a story of empowerment of consumers, and the industry is very focused on making lives better. Improving lives is at the core of what technology does. So in terms of interacting with government, organizations like ITI, which is a trade association that represents the technology industry, we've been around for 108 years. So going very far back. And our purpose is to inform government about policies that promote technology innovation and ensuring that those policies are designed to empower the consumers that want to take advantage of technology. We were discussing just a moment ago about the advantages of technology. And there's a great book written by Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, called Tools and Weapons. And it's a great reminder that technology can be used as a tool or it can be used as a weapon. What we're focused on is making sure it's used as a tool, and government is focused on making sure that it's not used as a weapon. So what we do is we help advocate for public policies that protect consumers where they need protection, but also promotes the ecosystem of innovation. And you noted that that involves a supply chain and making sure that products and services from around the world are accessible here in India, making sure that Indian consumers and businesses have access to the best technologies. And there are more people in India connected to the internet, 3 times more people than there are people in the United States. This is an incredible market for technology, the biggest market in the world for technology. And with the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister Modi to become the 3rd largest economy in the world, to become a $1 trillion marketplace for ICT and electronic products, our industry will continue to partner with government and provide recommendations on public policies that can advance the deployment of the most innovative technology.
You know, the gaming industry, of course, historically has pushed boundaries of device performance, both in India and the US. But how has that demand for high quality gaming influenced the market for consumer devices in turn?
What you're going to see now in the future, if and when there is legislative and regulatory certainty, what you will see is that all the real money gaming platforms that are today profitable and the unit economics are absolutely brilliant simply because it's almost a 50 million gamer market in India right now. You will see a lot of that money that is now going into game development. And that's a 2 to 3 year cycle. And that's when devices will come to play. So console gaming is actually 1% of gaming. So you'll see that, the PlayStations and the Xboxes are just expensive devices, right? And not many people in India can afford it. So once the content comes in, the price of hardware and the middleware associated with gaming will also start coming into play. Why? Because then local Indian manufacturers will see the opportunity to come in and do technology tie-ups and partnerships, etc. But that requires the content to be there. Right now there is mobile gaming, and that's perfectly all right. India just skipped the entire computer generation. We went from phone to television straight to mobile, right? We just skipped. Yeah, we just took that, and with a 1.2 billion cell phone market, of which half of which is smartphones, and half of which is almost 4G, now 5G. So I don't think mobile is going away. I think the gaming that you're talking about with consumer electronics and all those things will come in when the content engine starts developing. And the content engine requires a lot of regulatory certainty so that investors come in and say, okay, fine, we will take the long-term bet. Let's develop the next version of, localized Indian games in local languages. And when that leap comes in is when you'll see the hardware sector also moving up.
But let me ask you this, Vivan. When you look at how consumer tech markets are regulated globally, shed some light on the various ways. What are the different approaches? And which is, of course, perhaps the most ideal way to fostering responsible innovation?
Thank you. Again, a subject of a PhD, but I'll try to keep it short. So there are areas of convergence and divergence from the world, and particularly between India and US on issues of tech regulation. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but to run you through a few. Data protection, which is, Mr. Gopalakrishnan is no stranger to data protection. He worked on the bill for when he was in METI and in PMO. But we have largely taken an approach which derives from a consent-centric, informed user consent-centric approach, which is very akin to what we see in the European Union. Where we deviate is, I think we brought a little bit of an element of trusted supply chains within data protection, by which I mean we allow cross-border data flows, but only with countries with which we have a trusted relationship. Those countries are yet to be notified, but I think we won't get too many surprises in the first list. On content regulation, I think, again, where we are thinking alike in the US and India is that there needs to be a wider conversation on the kinds of harms you're seeing online across different platforms and media. But I think where we're beginning to deviate a little bit in India, and I think we'll need to course correct, is when we think about regulating for those harms, we shouldn't level up the regulations that we have and borrow from TV. We don't want a program code, we don't want an advertising code, and the Constitution sets out a broad parameter for what is allowed in the country and what is disallowed, and to the extent that we can reflect that in future codes of conduct for different media, it would keep us in sync a little bit with the developments in the US. On public procurement, I think, again, there are convergences. We see Make in America, Buy America, let's make every country great again is a theme that resonates across the world, because self-reliance is not just a buzzword, it is a necessity, as we've seen during COVID. But I think where we begin to deviate a little bit, where we need to swing the pendulum back, is thinking about domestic value addition a little more carefully. Particularly when we think about the things we're talking about today, consumer tech, software and services. In fact, in software, it's very, very hard to define what domestic value addition means. We were just having a conversation on artificial intelligence with some of the largest companies in the world, with Praveen ji and his peers. And it turns out that every bit of AI, for instance, that Microsoft, for instance, engineers, has a little bit of India in it. Every bit of AI that IBM is working on has a little bit of India in it. So India is inextricable from AI systems that are being built for consumers, B2C systems particularly. So I think we need to think about the constructs around public procurement a little more carefully as we move forward. There's also the theme of intermediary liability, and intermediaries are, those that facilitate consumers to interact with businesses online. Across the world, we're seeing narrowing of the so-called safe harbor that they've enjoyed over the last 20 years. DEEPAK JACOB will tell you a little bit about safe harbor because he was behind one of the seminal cases that defined safe harbor in India. He was defending eBay's CEO from going to jail in 2007-8, and that defined the first amendment, large amendment that we had in the Information Technology Act to give safe harbor to intermediaries online in India. We're seeing a narrowing of this construct because I think it was cast a bit too wide to begin with. Everything from cyber cafes to social media is an intermediary. So you're, again, seeing the pendulum swing a little bit back towards narrowing, but here we need to be careful not to get the balance wrong between innovation and accountability. So we need to make sure that we're not acting like cops when we think about laws and just try to find the biggest person in the room to get a hold of, but also think about the long tail that actually a lot of trust and safety issues arise from. And finally, I think another common area is how do we regulate emerging technologies? We have a few ideas in India, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we go along. But the prospects of providing legal certainty to technologies is important. And we've seen in India a lot of rules emerge, including in gaming, but also social media, digital media, OCCPs, which is curated platforms, emerge because of the answer to the question that a lot of petitioners were asking in courts, which is, how are you regulated as a service? Which is your parent act? And these questions will keep arising, with every successive wave of technology and the services that ride atop it. So we have to find ways to answer that between India and the US and other jurisdictions that are strategic partners, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of that with Jason as we go forward.
Yeah, but Mr. Gopalakrishnan, let me come to you quickly because you've been nodding vigorously at a lot of things that Vivan was mentioning, and given that you've previously also worked on a lot of the laws and rules that define our use and deployment of emerging technologies, and in this sort of all-pervasive digital realm that we all live in. Tell me how have you seen that perspective, that sort of innovators' perspective on regulations evolve perhaps here in relation to the US?
Okay, I'll speak more from what shouldn't be the case, in the sense like what he was telling. We need a bit of certainty, but unlike other areas of regulation, say like policing or taxation or things like that, the field is much more defined. What are your goals and how do you go about regulating? In terms of emerging technologies, frankly, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. In fact, what is happening today also possibly most of it is not fully known clearly. So it has to be more of a very cautious approach and try to be clear on what is the harm and then try to avoid it rather than take anything extreme. The other danger is we may sort of throw the baby with the bathwater. In the sense, if there are sectors where if initiative is stifled, then we lose a good opportunity. So we got to be more risk-taking in terms of letting things happen. We got to be more clear about focusing on harms which are actually harmful rather than trying to be very defensive, like something may go wrong, so let me be very, very harsh and stuff like that. So The only way out of this is consultative. And one saving grace is it is global. In fact, the dangers or threats of regulating the emerging technologies are, I think, normally similar across all democratic societies. So it should not be very variant among democracies about how you regulate these technologies. So be open, consult with the industry, and then look around, and I think that's one way of taking your regulation forward.
It's not the technology tool that is necessitating that regulation. It's the behavior or the misuse. So that's our basic message is don't target the technology. Don't look at technology as requiring a particular new set of rules. Look at the behaviors and target those as you would in the offline world as well.
So therefore, we need to have more and more consultation, as Mr. Gopalakrishnan was saying. The more and more consultations will make us understand what is the demand of the reality. I'm sorry to say, in last 40-50 years in the country, the policies were for certain set of people, and we were expecting that miracles will happen and the people sitting down the line will be benefited. Since last 10 years, there is a greater change. But again, we have to do many things.
Jason, while we talk about, of course, the Indo-US collaborations, let me also ask you, what areas of this collaboration hold the most potential for setting global standards in emerging technologies?
In terms of setting international standards, I think AI is one area that we've been talking about a lot and is really the future of technology. And both the US and India have taken the same thoughtful approach. And it's a thoughtful approach that we can applaud, in particular, as we look at the EU. The European Union has taken a very different approach. They've taken kind of a regulate first and ask questions later approach with the adoption of the AI Act in the EU. The loudest voices complaining about that approach are actually European technology companies, particularly small and medium businesses that just can't succeed in deploying AI in the face of that regulatory burden. I've spent a lot of time in India this week talking to government officials about the AI mission as set out by the Honorable Prime Minister. And that mission includes not regulating first and asking questions later, as happened in Europe, but rather examining the landscape for opportunities to encourage investment here in AI.
The current government, the last 10 years, has set an example of not cut, copying, and pasting, as somebody said. They've been slow to regulate, but what they first do is to create the policy document, whether it's the Digital India policy, whether it's the Gati Shakti, the master plan. So generally they've studied the landscape, understood what foreign regulations and legislations have done, understood the consumer harms associated with those regulations. They've also looked at what and how it impacts the investment climate, and what do foreign nations think about those regulations, come out with a policy document, and then allow the industry to figure out its own course.
Speaking about India and US collaboration, and given the global nature of technology, Vivan, how can this sort of collaboration enhance the impact on global supply chains?
We've gotten good as almost suppliers to these ecosystem players. So we've built companies that are best in class in many, many market segments in the digital space today. Whether it is hailing a ride, whether it is getting something to your doorstep in an instant, whether it is watching a movie, whether it is indeed gaming, whether it is, SaaS tools that enable consumers to do more. We have Indian alternatives. In fact, Indian companies have sort of primacy in these spaces because they are able to adapt to and target the sort of Indian reality. And they have to work very closely and ride on the coattails of the global majors to be able to now provide these services to the world. So I think it's a symbiotic conversation. The moment we think of it as a binary, that somehow we have to create some sort of a Galapagos effect in India and isolate ourselves from the world and create services only for ourselves, and that will sustain us. I think that would be missing the woods for the trees.
When it comes to the government, how can you create policies that incentivize private sector investment in consumer technology? Give me a little bit of an insight from you on that.
If we talk about technology, then from the consumer's perspective, the first thing which strikes our mind is e-commerce. Today, it has, we have gone one step ahead. Now, quick commerce. And the next future is social commerce. But if we do not adhere to certain principles, you are going to destroy, damage the retail fabric of the country. And this fabric is fundamental to national economy. So therefore, I would strongly suggest to US and other countries, though we welcome with folded hands. But yes, you cannot take India, consider as a banana republic, and you don't care for the law of the land. So my ultimate thing is, because everything is dependent upon consumer. Whatever we are producing, whatever we are selling, whatever we are providing, ultimately somebody is user. And user is a consumer. So my sincere advice would be that we welcome everybody, especially US, because we are strategic partner. But yes, we do care for our laws, we do care for our country. We are there to extend help to you. We are there to receive help from you. But at an equal level, the standard which has been set by none other than Prime Minister Modi.
Deepak, coming to you, what steps can industry leaders in the consumer tech space take to ensure that the online space remains secure and trustworthy? Give us your perspective on that.
A lot is said, but not much done. And I think there is a lethargy to it simply because, it's seen as a cost of business that need not be done until there's a problem. But with
Reactive.
yes, now it's becoming clearer that that a stitch in time saves 9, and so this is now not becoming a option. You have to put in places to ensure that both data protection and privacy of users is actually fully secured. That's one. Two, on trust and safety and user safety, I think it's a halfway house. It's seen more as educating users and building trust in your platform is seen as something that is again not absolutely essential because it may disrupt his time spent. What are the metrics? It may disrupt all the metrics, your customer acquisition cost, your time spent, your unit per economics, etc. So again, it's a halfway house, but a lot more needs to be done by the industry, less by the government really.
It's like an iceberg when you think of cybersecurity. A lot of actions are happening below the surface. For instance, by device makers, OEMs, operating systems, app stores. And I think we have to recognize this action for what it is. There is an opportunity to work with these providers of, let's call it critical infrastructure in the software realm, to really up-level our view, our vantage point on the kinds of cybersecurity threats that are affecting us today. And it's no surprise that over the last 2-3 years since COVID, the cyber attacks in the surface area has grown. And a lot of those attacks are from adversarial countries. And this is where we have to smarten up a little bit and not conflate issues and be very clear about where we need big platforms to work with the government in strategic areas to kind of countervail some of these pressures. I think the Americans are doing it particularly well, although they also have a bevy of civil society voices that crop up from time to time to agitate against this kind of implicit partnership. But the faster technology moves, the faster your adversaries move, It's clearer that you need to be able to forge them and be dynamic and agile and work with partners on an everyday basis. And any law or any legal intervention or policy intervention that's taken in a silo that ignores this dynamic is going to also be problematic for us. And I think we've seen, and our report also talks about, in the case of the digital competition bill, which thankfully for now is in cold storage, which Mr. Khandelwal doesn't need to take e-commerce companies to task. There are possible interferences with how device makers, for instance, can ensure your security, and it's done so passively, and you don't have to do anything but update your software. So, I mean, we need to think about these things a little more deliberately than we do in public discourse.
Please, of course.
I have to add one thing. Nowadays, data has become a sovereign wealth. And it is often said that technology has no boundaries. But data should be stored in India, in our own country. So data needs to be localized. This we need to understand very clearly. Because as Mr. Gopalakrishnan was saying, there is a matter of national security, there is matter of various other kinds of security.
So I think there's a technology industry view on data protection, and that is that it's vitally important, again, given the competitive nature of the technology industry. If consumers feel as if their data is not being protected, they're going to go somewhere else. So it is vitally important, and protection of data is at core of what the technology industry does. With respect to the Honorable Member of Parliament, we actually think that data localization actually creates more opportunities for cybercrime because it creates more points of failure, if you will. One of the reasons that cloud services are so vital and so important and so successful is because it doesn't have a single physical point of failure or point of access. And what data localization policies end up doing, unfortunately, they're well-intentioned, and for purposes of law enforcement and national security, certain data does need to be protected and stored locally, no question about it. But for the business of technology, particularly for Indian businesses that want to do business around the world, they need the ability to access global data markets and to move their customers' data around the world securely. Mm-hmm. So there are ways to do it, protecting the important, vital national interest of India, while also allowing Indian businesses to serve customers around the world, to export their services and products around the world, and making sure that global data flows are done securely, and protecting data while still enabling global commerce. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think that's a great note to end our conversation on. Thank you so much to all my panelists. It was fantastic. We are seeing a convergence of purpose and innovation to solve the world's problems. This partnership between India and the US will no doubt define the pace of innovation for the world, driving impact on billions of lives globally. Thank you for watching this special episode of Media Dialogues, and check storyboard18.com for more from this forum and a marquee report called Consumer Welfare in the Smartphone Ecosystem. The report analyzes responses of around 5,200 smartphone users to study their preferences and behaviors, aiming to understand how the proposed digital competition bill will impact consumer welfare in this ecosystem. So head on over to storyboard18.com for more on that.